From the vacation capital of the world, it's the Nick Carioti Show.
And as promised, we're going to go ahead and talk about purchasing multi-unit properties. Now, if you had an opportunity in the past to purchase like a triplex or a fourplex before, you may have noticed that the procedure tends to be a little different than when purchasing a single-family residence. So if you like, get a pencil and paper ready because you might want to jot down a few notes as we go through this. Now, again, buying multi-unit properties tend to be different than buying, let's say, a single unit like a condo or townhome or even a single-family home. There are many factors that new investors may not be thinking about, and we'll be discussing most of that today as well. Now, my personal preference would be a fourplex. And we'll talk about different reasons why that is in just a moment. So through the course of the show, we'll be referring to this purchase as a fourplex. Now, I feel as a first-time multi-unit purchaser, you may not want to start off with more than this. And there's some good reasons for that we'll talk about. But a fourplex is probably the highest you want to get. And, of course, you don't want to get anything smaller than a duplex. And we'll talk about that as well. Now, there's a couple of preliminary thoughts I would like to get out before we even start. And that is, first off, choosing a location and determining the right property and price range. You know, these are two important factors that you have to give some special attention to and make sure that you're purchasing what you're really looking for and what's going to give you the best return. So let's start off with location. Now, obviously, you'll want to choose a good rental area that has a good occupancy rate. Now, this is where your realtor is going to come in very handy. You know, be sure to choose a realtor that's going to have your best interest at heart and that's looking out for, you know, your goal and making sure that you accomplish that goal at the end, which is going to be to maximize your return as well. Now, you may have to look for properties outside of your familiar areas, outside of your comfort zone. You can't be put off by this sort of thing because you're going to find that, you know, duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes are really not found everywhere. There's certain areas that you're going to find these in. So don't be bothered by, you know, that sort of thing. Now, when deciding on a price you want to spend on a property, a good rule of thumb is to make sure that just 2 of the 4 rentals, for instance, in a fourplex, will cover the entire overhead needed. So, for instance, if the rent is $1,000 a month per unit and you're bringing in $4,000 a month, you want to be sure that your overhead is no more than $2,000 a month. Now, this is kind of aggressive, but it's a really good rule of thumb to maximize your return, and it gives you a safety buffer. You know, this means that you can have 2 vacancies at any given time and still not have to dip into your pocket, you know, to cover any overhead or expenses. So you're going to have a positive cash flow almost at all times. Now, to do this, a good realtor will have to research the rentals in that area and the amount of time or vacant rentals stay on the market, you know, to determine you know, the kind of units that you're going to get and what you're going to rent them for as well. So all of that has to be taken into consideration, of course, and the area is going to play a big part of that. Now, this might sound like an aggressive or unrealistic, you know, thing to do for some, but I'm looking again at your best case scenario. This is what you're shooting for. If it falls in a little short of this, it's not going to be devastating. But if you're shooting for the best case scenario, you have the better chance of getting the maximum return. Now, once you have found the property that you want and you have determined an offer based on that income, you'll need to make a reasonable offer on the property. Now, not to worry, because if everything else doesn't fall into place, such as financing, inspections, and the appraisal, you'll have time to back out of the deal if you really needed to. Now, next, you'll need to get your financing in order. So you have a couple of choices when it comes to financing income property. You know, my first choice would be as owner-occupied with an FHA loan. Now, this might not fit everybody's lifestyle to do what I'm about to describe here, but as a first-time investor, if you're able to pull this off, you're going to find some real advantages to this. And by going FHA and occupying one of the units, you can still get in with an FHA loan and 3.5% down if you occupy one of those units. So if you're getting a fourplex and you live in one of the units, you know, you're going to find that the other units not only will pay your total overhead and your mortgage as well, but it'll be considered owner-occupied, and again, you can get in with those lower rates and lower down payments as well. Now, I understand that this might not be the exact place or unit you want to actually be living in for the long term, but it can get you in cheap and then get you refinanced later on. So, 6 months, 8 months, a year later, whenever it may be, you can do a refinance and kind of move along. And you may wind up doing this with a second property as well, if you have that flexibility to do that. Now, this might not sound like anything you had intended originally, but you need to keep it in the back of your mind, just for a moment. One of your options is what this is. Now, next, you'll have traditional investment property financing. So if you don't want to live there and you're looking to go a different route, you can do this. But what you'll need to realize is that you're going to have to come in with 20 to 25% down. This one factor alone keeps many people out of the investment market. So when it comes down to the amount you're going to be putting down, well, unless you got cash put aside, this could be difficult. And that's why I talk about FHA and I talk about occupying one of the units if possible. Now, next, we're going to talk about a few ways to structure the offer itself and the deal as well. So first off, and this is going to sound kind of strange, but you must submit an offer and get it accepted before even seeing the inside of the units. Of course, some exceptions are going to apply here. Now, this may sound crazy at first, but hear me out. Negotiating price and terms before seeing the inside of the units is actually standard practice in many areas for duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes. Mainly because the seller requires discretion when selling their 2 to 4 unit buildings. They don't want to alert their tenants that the property is for sale and inconvenience them with showings unless they know that they have a buyer that is willing and able to purchase the property. So the first thing you do is get that offer in, get it locked up, with the offer, and hopefully get it accepted. Now, this is not always the case, of course. Some sellers feel confident about not losing their tenants and have no problem letting them know that it's for sale. And although this seems a little backwards, it should not be a reason for concern because the standard purchase contract does provide the buyer with 10 to 15 days after acceptance to cancel the sale without any penalty. And we'll talk about that. This means that the buyer has, these days after the price and terms have been negotiated and accepted to view the property, have full inspections, a complete appraisal as well, and secure financing. And if for any reason you can't get these things done, you're going to get out of the deal and get your money back, and there's no risk involved. But at least you locked it up with the price and terms that you wanted, and now you can take your time doing what you need to do for your due diligence. Now, the buyer can still cancel the purchase without any penalty as long as they cancel within that time period. So, yeah, you may have 15 days. You may be able to stretch it to 20 days perhaps, but you obviously have to stay within that time period. Number 2, do not disturb the tenants. Now, this is common sense, really, especially if the seller or the seller's agent asked you not to. You should not contact the tenants or enter the property without the seller's permission, of course, or inform any of the tenants or neighbors that the property is for sale. So you don't want to kind of disrupt things. This is going to put the seller off. It's going to tick him off, and it's definitely going to hurt your negotiating power when it comes down to it. Now, most multi-units for sale are listed without the tenant's knowledge, and buyers and agents need to respect that privacy, of course. Now, once the buyer and seller reach an agreement, the buyer can then do all their due diligence after that, of course. Now, number 3, contracts and procedures can be different for multi-unit purchases, as I mentioned. There are many different differences between single-family purchases and multi-units. For example, the residential income property purchase agreement, that's the contract itself, is often used instead of a residential purchase agreement, mainly because it already includes certain provisions that pertain to multi-unit transactions. Also, appraisals and inspections often have to work around the tenant's schedules. So the seller has to give the tenant proper notice before anything can be actually done. Now, number 4, disclosures can be limited. And this is true. This is very true of rental properties of any kind. Seller disclosures are required that the seller disclose all the defects and issues that he is aware of regarding the property itself. Now, however, it is common amongst multifamily properties for the seller to be unaware of many of these defects. So although we have a 6-page seller's disclosure that we normally require, the different ways they can answer those questions pertaining to the different elements of the property, vary. They can say, I do know something about this, I don't know something about this, or, I have no idea, or whatever it may be. And a lot of times you're going to find that they're going to say they have no idea what this is because they haven't been living there. Now, defects could exist, however, but the seller may not know about these. Okay, so this could be due to the tenants, again, not informing the owner of problems. That happens a lot. Tenants will wait till the last minute, of course, before they actually tell the tenant or the landlord, before they move, perhaps. So these items could build up, and there could be many things wrong, of course. Of course, it'll all be found in your inspection later. Or it could be a bank foreclosure on the property or something like that, where the bank is not disclosing anything because, again, they don't know of anything. Regardless, the seller is only required to disclose what he is aware of. Number 5, Properly priced properties usually sell fast, and I've always said this over the years. A properly priced property in any market can easily have multiple offers in. In today's market, well-priced properties, whether single-family or multifamily, can generate multiple offers quickly, and with so few of these properties on the market, a buyer would have to be very aggressive when offering, and your timing on how you offer this, as we mentioned earlier as well.